and welcome to this class. In today's class, we are going to talk about adverbial clause. This is going to be a continuation of our discussion on clause. In the previous class, we've introduced the concept of clause. We introduced the concept of clause where we talked about, or we said that a clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb, and we distinguished between a clause and a phrase. That the difference between a clause and a phrase is that a clause contains a subject and a verb, while a phrase does not contain a verb. And we talked about the types of clause, where we identified two types of clauses. We have independent clause and dependent clause. And we talked about dependent clause as a kind of clause that cannot stand on its own and have a complete thought, while independent clause is a type of clause that can stand on its own and have a complete thought. And we also identified the types of dependent clause. We said that we have three types of dependent clause. So dependent clause, we have different types of it. We have noun dependent clause, or what we just call noun clause, and we have adjectival dependent clause, or what we just call adjectival clause, and we have adverbial dependent clause, or what we just call adverbial clause. And in the previous classes, we've talked about noun clause and adjectival clause. So today we are going to focus our attention on adverbial clause. So we are looking at the meaning of adverbial clause. We are looking at types of adverbial clause. We're looking at markers of adverbial clause, and we're looking at types of adverbial clause. And we're looking at examples of adverbial clause. And lastly, we look at the functions of adverbial clause. So we start with the meaning of adverbial clause. Before we talk about adverbial clause, it is important for us to talk about adverb, because it's from adverb that we got adverbial clause. An adverb is a part of speech that modifies a verb, just like we talked about adjective as a part of speech that modifies a noun. It says more things about a noun, that is for adjective, but for adverb, it says more things about the verb in a sentence. It modifies or qualifies a verb. For instance, when we have a sentence like he talks nicely, the verb in this sentence is talks. And what is a verb actually? The verb is the action word in a sentence. So an adverb tells us how the action performs its action, how the verb performs its action, where it performs its action, why it performs its action, when it performs its action. So we are actually going to identify different types of adverbs because of the different roles it performs when it modifies a verb. If we are talking about when adverb or when a verb performs its action, then we'll be using adverb of place to show the adverb where the verb performs its action. If we are talking about how a verb performs its action, how, then we'll be talking about adverb of manner, the manner that the verb performs its action. And if we're talking about why a verb performs its action, then we'll be talking about adverb of reason. We also have other types of adverbs, but we are actually going to be talking about four main types of adverbs. We talk about where adverb performs its action, that is adverb of place, and when adverb performs its action, that is the one we call adverb of time, how adverb or how a verb performs its action, the one we call adverb of manner, and uh, why a verb performs its action, the one we call adverb of reason. So these are the four types of adverb we'll be talking about, and that will give us four types of adverbial clause that we are going to be talking about in this class. So, talking about adverbial clause is when a group of words is performing the function of an adverb in a sentence. So instead of having one single word like nicely that is modifying a verb in a sentence, we have a group of words, and that group of words must contain a subject and a verb. We have a group of words like that that contains a subject and a verb and is modifying a verb in a sentence. We call it an adverbial clause. So, adverbial clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb, and that modifies a verb in a sentence. Modifies a verb in a sentence. So just like we described about adverb, the same function that adverb performs in a sentence is the function that adverbial clause performs in a verb in the sentence, only that adverbial clause is a group of words instead of a single word that is modifying a verb. So we are going to identify four types of adverbial clause. we are going to be looking at adverbial clause of place. Adverbial clause of place. Adverbial clause of place. And this adverbial clause of place, they are identified by the markers or with the markers. We use these markers where they're identified by these markers where, wherever, wherever, and anywhere. And anywhere. These are the markers that we use in identifying adverbial clause of place. So when we see a group of words that's starting with this, or when you see a clause that starts with where, wherever, and anywhere, we begin to suspect the presence of adverbial clause of place. We also have adverbial clause of time, adverbial clause of time. This one answers the question when, just like adverbial clause of place answers the question where. Where does the verb perform its action? These markers identify it where, anywhere, and wherever. And when an adverb or when a verb is when we are trying to identify the time or when a verb takes its action, we use adverbial clause of time. And adverbial clause of time is identified with the following markers. We use these markers for it: after. The markers are after, before, until, as soon as, as long as, why, when, since, by the time, until, and before. So these are the markers that we use in identifying adverbial clause of time. And I say that adverbial clause of time, they answer the question when. When does this action take place? Adverbial clause of place answers the question where. Where does this action take place? The action there is the verb. And I say that adverbial clause is modifying a verb in a sentence. When it is answering the question when, or telling us where an action takes place, we call it adverbial clause of place. When it is answering the question when, we call it adverbial clause of time. That is when it is telling us when an action takes place. Okay, we have a third adverb. We call it adverbial clause of reason. Adverbial clause Adverbial clause of reason. Adverbial clause of reason. This one answers the question why. When somebody asks you why, the person is expecting a reason from you. So adverbial clause of reason tries to identify the reason why a verb takes its action. So we have these markers for adverbial clause of reason. We have since, we have because, and we also have as. These markers identify adverbial clause of reason. I said that adverbial clause of reason is used to identify why a verb performs its action. Why a verb performs its action in a sentence. And the markers for it are since, because, and as. We also have the one we call adverbial clause of manner. The manner tells us how the verb performs its action. Adverbial clause of manner. Adverbial clause of manner. Adverbial clause of manner. And this one is identified by the markers. Is identified by the markers as, like, and as if. As if. We also have other types of adverbial clauses, but we are going to talk about only these four in this class. Now, examples of adverbial clauses. Examples. Example 1. If we have a sentence like he eats wherever he goes. Wherever he goes. Wherever he goes. And we are asked to identify this part of the sentence that is marked off. Now, first of all, we ask ourselves what type of group of words it is. Is it a phrase or is it a clause? It has a subject and it has a verb. Therefore, it is a clause. Now, it has a marker wherever. So, we are confirming that it is an adverbial clause of place. This is an adverbial clause of place. He eats wherever he goes. The verb there is eats. And so this group of words is telling us the place that he eats or where he eats. That he eats wherever he goes. Example 2. He eats before he goes to work. Before he goes to work. Now, if this part of the sentence is marked off, before he goes to work, and we are asked to identify this part of the sentence. Now we start by trying to identify whether it is a clause or a phrase. It has a subject and it has a verb, therefore it is a clause. Now it has the marker before, and this is part of our marker for adverbial clause of time. Therefore, this is an adverbial clause of time. If we want to confirm it, we come to the verb and try to identify whether it is talking about where, how, why, and when. He eats when, before he goes to work. So it answers the question when. That means that it is an adverbial clause of time. In this example, if you come to the verb and ask ourselves, he eats where? Wherever he goes. So because it answers the question where, it is an adverbial clause of place. But this one that answers the question when is called an adverbial clause of time. Example 3. 3. He eats. He eats like. He eats like, or okay, he eats like he has money. He eats like he has money. We can mark off this part of the sentence like he has money. He eats like he has money. Now, this is, it has a subject and it has a verb. So we are concluding that this part of the sentence is a clause. Now it has a marker for adverb like, and this is a marker for adverb of manner. Adverb of manner. Now for us to confirm that it is an adverb of manner, we come to the verb, we ask the question how. If this part of the sentence, this clause answers the question, it means that it is an adverbial clause of manner. So how does he eat? He eats like he has money. So it answers the question correctly. So we conclude that this is an adverbial clause of manner because it answers the question how. In another example, if you have he eats, he eats because he has food. Because he has food. And this part of the sentence is marked off because he has food. It contains a subject and contains a verb. And this is an identifier for adverbial clause. Now we come to the verb and ask whether it's this an identifier for adverb of reason. Because now for us to confirm whether it is an adverbial clause of reason, we come to the verb and ask the question why. If this part of the sentence identifies it or answers the question, then it means that the marked off part of the sentence is an adverbial clause of reason. So we can ask ourselves, why does he eat? He eats because he has money. Why does he eat? He eats because he has money. So it answers the question correctly. So we conclude that this is an adverbial clause of reason. So we've seen the four types of adverbial clauses: adverbial clause of place, adverbial clause of time, adverbial clause of manner, and adverbial clause of reason. And we've given the markers or identifiers for each of the adverbial clauses. We also talked about the meaning of adverbial clause and the meaning of adverb and types of adverb. We also talked briefly about clause, types of dependent clause.